speaking, it tells you the importance attached to this conference. Let me just give you just a quick, background to this. That this is the Forestry Commission in collaboration with Form Ghana and Nyan Road Business University will organize the first international working conference on the opportunities for plantation development from Ghana from the 16th to 17th of March. And worldwide, it's been established that deforestation and forest degradation contributes greatly to climate change, and the world is set to lose about 3.4 million hectares of forest annually. And if we don't do something about it, well, like they say, the last tree dies, the last man dies when the last tree also dies. And so we have the CEO of Sustainable Forestry Investments with us here in the studio, Paul Hall. Good morning to you and welcome. And Paul has worked extensively in terms of forest preservation many years internationally. He's Dutch. Good morning to you. Well, how do you say good morning in Dutch?
Goedemorgen.
Goedemorgen. All right, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm excited about this because of what it presents, but just quick introduction to why we're having this conference and what's this influence the conference that we're having.
Yes, thank you. Why we have this conference, as you all know, there was a big climate conference in Paris with excellent commitments on reforestation, on climate mitigation and so forth. But this conference in Accra is mainly to talk about actions. So the political momentum is good, but we really want to talk about how can we take now the next step and how can we continue with further steps on planting trees in Africa.
Okay, even before we get to the next step, if you look at Ghana in general, I'm sure you worked in Ghana and so you know our terrain. Which areas have you worked in Ghana? Where are you planting trees?
We planted trees near Tejiman in Akamadan. That's where we started 10 years ago. And after that we started in the Tain2 Forest Reserve in Birukum, Sunyani. So till today we have planted about 10 million trees. We employ about 1,000 people. And we are at the stage that we can say, okay, we can now move on to the next step and talk more to all the players on the continent about how to expand this, because as a company we are maybe big in Ghana, but compared to what is happening here with deforestation in Ghana and Africa, it's still very little.
Okay, how big a problem is it? Because I know in Ghana the biggest challenge we have is land. I mean, let's even forget about the capital. Land is a big issue. Now, if you go to these communities, do you face the challenge, resistance of people who do not have an understanding of why we need to preserve or why we need to plant trees?
Yes, definitely the land issue is an issue in Ghana and in general in Africa. But I think it is not that complicated. It is about being a good neighbor. If you start as a company or an organization with tree planting on degraded lands, where also farmers are involved, you have to deal with them, you have to deal with your neighbors, so you have to explain what you intend to do, you have to collaborate with them. So we started with an intercropping system where we allow farmers to plant their tomatoes, their maize in between the teak. And that was a good positive sign for them that we are willing to cooperate. And secondly, I think you can only do forestry if you can convince people that there is each year a win-win situation. So the stool and the chiefs and the government and the investor or the initiative, I'm not talking only about private investors, I'm also talking about communities who are planting trees. If you can develop a concept which is really about a win-win situation for all the stakeholders, then you will see that the trees are surviving and bringing the good to all the stakeholders, so to say.
Okay, but how does it work? For instance, if you mentioned the situation where you plant the trees and you still can have crops in between them, and so farmers can have them. But how does it work? How long can a farmer continue to work on a land that you're planting trees? Because at some point, I know the trees will go really up.
Of course, we have to be very strict on that, because this intercropping system with farmers was tested all over the world. And the big challenge is, of course, if you say, okay, farmer, you can plant your crops, and as long as we have no canopy closure with the trees, you can continue. Well, a farmer is farmer smart. He will make sure that the canopy will never close. So what we said, you have to do it differently. We are very strict. It's for the first 2 years that the farmers can can grow their crops on the land. They have land for free. They can harvest the crops and they can move on to other areas with us. That is one example, but of course there is also the example of impact on employment. Forestry is long-term business, so there's also long-term opportunities for employment. So these type of examples, it's one hand building awareness, explaining your message very clearly before you start, and on the other hand make sure that there is benefit each day, each year for all the stakeholders.
Okay, so do you conduct any form of education, and generally what is the people's understanding of a tree planting? You know, farmers, are they welcoming, and what sort of education do you give them?
Yes, a very good question. I think in essence each farmer is also a tree planter in Africa. It is so close to each other. But looking at the background of most of the farmers or even forest people, in Africa mainly the education is about natural forest management and not so much about planting trees and maintaining them, that you make sure that you get your revenues. Sure. And I think that is the key. We see all over Ghana and all over Africa, we see farmers planting trees, but not all of them are very successful with really getting the revenue. So there's a lot to do on education so that you really grow a tree, which is a very attractive investment for a farmer.
Okay, all right. You keep talking about, you know, investments and sustainable forestry investments, and it's a long term. You mentioned a tree could take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So how willing are corporate organizations to invest in trees, and what are the returns? I mean, what's the likelihood? Will they get any benefits from it?
Yeah, I think that is the big frustration of the sector today, of the forest plantation sector in Africa. If we look at Paris and we look at the political commitments, everybody is happy there. There was a good commitment, there was nice French food, and of course it was good. But it was a very good political momentum. And I think what we try to do here in Ghana with this international conference, with all the major players like the Forestry Commission, like governments from 10 different African countries, NGOs, financial sector, we really want to talk about finance. I believe that today, although there is political attention for it, it is not combined with a strong effort of financing long-term forestry. And today we see mainly community initiatives, also government initiative and private sector. And the private sector is trying to fund this on private equity and is not able to do this with the climate funds, with the development banks.
Okay, but why is the commitment not there? Why is the financial commitment not there? What's the frustrating thing? I mean,
I think although politically also the development banks, the climate funds are very committed to do it, they face problems with the financial instruments. So how to structure that long-term, soft loan, low interest rates, soft securities on it, that is something which is still new for the sector. And we have to talk about it. Very simple. We have to talk about it in Accra with the banks and with all the players. They have to understand each other.
Okay, so money is there, but it's not directed at it because it's not important, or because people just don't appreciate the impact of that on the climate.
They maybe appreciate the impact on the climate, but they struggle how to finance it. So again, there is commitment, but they struggle with a 10 years time frame. How can you get back your money? How can you provide this in a long-term, secure way? It is possible. We have seen it in other sectors. In the renewable energy, we see already long-term investments coming up. It was also a hot topic in Paris. And I think it's possible, but we have to do it.
Okay, all right. I'm interested in why did Kofi Annan agree to do this? What was the tipping factor for him?
Yes, we are very grateful that Mr. Annan wanted to commit to this important topic. I believe that if we look at the interest of Mr. Annan and his background in the climate change topic, plus sustainable agriculture in Africa, then it becomes very close to forestry as well. So Mr. Annan is also very much interested to see how we can take the next step in concrete action, in implementation, in access to finance, things like that. And that is, I think, excellent that we have top players, international players, but also top players from the Ghana government, from the Tanzanian government here, to really discuss together how can we this closer to implementation.
All right, then. A very big thank you to you, Paul Hall, as the CEO of Sustainable Forestry Investment. And tomorrow, the conference will come on tomorrow. It starts at 9. Is it 9 a.m.?
Yes, tomorrow morning.
It starts at 9 a.m., but you'll be there the whole day. You have the opening ceremony, and then the discussion will continue after that.
Exactly. It's a working conference, so it's very much for for invited people, but yeah, we will do our best.
I have an invitation.
Yes, definitely. You're most welcome.
All right then. So tomorrow be the New Forest for Africa. It's between 16th and the 17th of March tomorrow. The venue, is it a conference?
It's a Kempinski Hotel.
Oh, Kempinski Hotel. Okay, so it's at the Kempinski Hotel. Be there tomorrow, 9 a.m. Be there on time. They start on time.